Hello, good evening. My name is Ana Solis, and this video is about gay marriage between a man and a man. And I just want to let you know that this video is intended to educate our viewer about the truth of being homosexual and bisexual intimacy and marriage between a man and a man. And just to clarify something, I'm not criticizing any sexual inclinations because we cannot judge, and we're all exposed to having family members that may have inclinations and not necessarily that are shown or that are very imminent or that are very clear. But you never know. Maybe a husband may have different inclinations. As one of my friends was saying, that this husband, they saw him at a nightclub and he had a boyfriend and he seemed like a man, like, because you never know. It's not about video criticizing any mannerisms. No, it's about an illustration of what I've learned. And I have done extensive studies and research about this issue. And believe it or not, the reason that I made this video is because I'm a fan of Freddie Mercury and George Michael. They were very dear to me because to me, they have the sexiest voice in the world. To me, they are geniuses. And when I was struck when I learned that they died of AIDS. Well, we know for a fact that Freddie Mercury died of AIDS, and it's not clear yet if George Michael died of AIDS. But what we know through renowned forensic doctor Hunter, is that according to his death certificate, the underlying cause of his death does have to do with AIDS. And you know that to me, it was an untimely death. He died of 53 years old, and Freddie Mercury died in his 40s. So it's a tragedy because they made beautiful music. And believe it or not, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Freddie Mercury. I loved his songs. I still love his songs. I love Bohemian Rhapsody, Mama, I don't want to die. I love him. And also I love his other song, We Will Rock You. We will rock you. And then George Michael, I love his song, Last Christmas, I Gave You My Heart. It's such a beautiful song. So to me, they're my idols. And I was sad to learn that they died. And that's why I said, did they have to die? And I learned that they didn't. And then I thought to myself, well, what about our families? What's happening? I did a lot of research on Freddie Mercury, and that's one of the reasons why I began to do this video, because I'm concerned about this tragic deaths and Rock Hudson, and it always happens that I understand that this disease also affects other genders, like women or drug addicts and etc. But I learned that the highest risk of contracting this disease is through male to male sex. And I'm not against gay marriage if it weren't because they're in great danger. And many people think, well, it's one-on-one. And Freddie Mercury, we all know that he was very promiscuous and that he had sex with a lot of male people. But when he found true love, and that's the saddest part, when he found true love in Jim Hutton, by that time he settled down, but it was too late. And to say the truth, it's very hard, in my opinion, almost impossible to have somebody that it'll be your first love, your first sexual encounter, and that person will be the one that you marry. You never know what's behind and their history, sexual history. And by the time they got married and they found their true love and they were monogamous, they contracted AIDS. So that's a red flag to all of us. And that is one of the reasons, as a mother, in a very loving manner, I want to tell you a little bit about Freddie because, like I said, he's my idol. I went to see his movie. I researched on everything about him and how it happened because he wasn't supposed to die. And it saddened me also because he had a girlfriend, you know. He was not homosexual, he was bisexual. So in my opinion, this even brings another red flag because being that he was bisexual, he had a chance to fall in love with a woman. And we build our own destiny, in my opinion. Yes, destiny can be changed. So what is so sad about Freddie Mercury? He died at the age of 45 in an untimely manner. And we also know for a fact that I want to mention this because she said that he lived a full life, that he was happy, he did it all. And that I guess many people think, well, he did it all, he was ready to die. If that's the case, then why did he spend so much money trying to cure himself, trying to find a cure for this incurable disease? And nowadays you think, well, they found the solution because there's new pills, there's new medication that makes AIDS almost undetectable. But what they don't tell you is that this medication costs $100 a pill, $5,000 a month. And if you lose one day, if you miss one day of not taking that pill, the disease will worsen and you will spread the disease, or they will spread it to you. So it concerns me. And just to clarify one thing, that I just want to clarify that I'm not against gays, because as a matter of fact, this video is not about lesbians, because lesbians are not even a danger. As a matter of fact, they're the least ladies that are in danger, because the AIDS virus is in the blood and in semen. And of course, girls do not have semen and they can contract AIDS. But if you study, if you go and do your research, you will learn that AIDS is decreasing among women and drug addicts and rampantly increasing in homosexuals and bisexuals. And the sad part is that I want you to know for a fact that in the 1970s, 1980s, when AIDS was not diagnosed yet, do you know what the name was for that disease? It was GRID, and that stands for gay-related immune deficiency. It was not even AIDS. And guess why it was GRID? Because it began with homosexuality, men having sex with men. And if you do your research with the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, it's a reliable organization. It clearly states that AIDS, the highest risk of AIDS is among bottoming sex. I didn't even know what the word bottoming meant. It meant, the bottom man is on the bottom and the semen goes through him, the man on the top. I guess they insert the semen through anal sex. And that is the highest risk. It's extremely high. And did you know that AIDS, that's why in jail, when you go to jail, when men go to jail, that's when they're highly exposed to AIDS. So similar to Freddie, George Michael, lead singer of the famous band Wham, after numerous sexual encounters with men, he finally found the love of his life in Anselmo, And just like Freddie Mercury, tragedy struck. And at first his Anselmo contracted AIDS. Anselmo died in George Michael's arms of AIDS. And you know what? George Michael became very depressed. It was 2 years that George Michael took care of him. And it's so ironic that these two iconic singers were struck with tragedy in very similar ways. After finding the love of their lives, their only true love according to them, and do your research because that's what they said, George became, they contracted AIDS. So I began to wonder, and I put two on two. And AIDS, it's so risky. Nowadays, it really concerns me because nowadays being gay is a trend. Even if a female or male, but we're going to talk about males because females are not in danger. To tell you the truth, being a lesbian, like I said, they're not in danger. I have family members who are from the male gender, and I'm a mother, and to tell you the truth, I don't trust anybody because nowadays you don't know if they're gays or not gays and if their inclination, because now people are trying to make it seem like you can have both sexes, and even in some countries they're advocating for same-sex dressing, and they're telling their little children, like, it doesn't matter if you want to be a girl, you can be a girl. How can they do that to a little child who has not even developed? I think that's child abuse because it's like endangering that child in the future to be gay, and then it's a form of suicide, because their inclination in later years, what they don't know, or I don't know if they don't know, and that's why I want to tell you that AIDS is increasing in bisexuals and homosexuals. So please, mothers, don't encourage your children to incline for this to be bisexual or homosexual. I encourage you to try to, lead them in a just straight way and tell them what I'm telling you, because I'm not lying. What I'm saying is the truth. And if you don't believe me, you do your own research. So, like I said, I'm a true fan of Freddie and of George Michael, and I did do a research, and to my opinion, it was a waste of life because there were geniuses. They could be still doing music, and they're not able because they're dead. And I wonder if their deaths could have been avoided. And it saddened me because I learned that Freddie at one point had a beautiful girlfriend. He was bisexual, and this girl was Mary Austin. She was blonde, blue eyes, gorgeous girl. They describe her as, beautiful. But what's so sad is that he dated her for 5 years, and while he was dating her, he was also in this group, the Queen group, and he had also other inclinations, but he was very in love with Mary. As a matter of fact, he made a song called Love of My Life, and it was dedicated to Mary. But then guess what? Temptation came to Freddie Mercury, and he was heavily tempted with gay men. Gays led him to his death. So gays, people, homosexual, were aggressively at certain times tempting Freddie. And for that reason, he broke up with Mary, because he wanted to explore the gay scene. He wanted to see what it, and he was very happy because he was doing everything with everybody. And like I said, that led him to his death. So Leslie, one of Freddie's friends, said that Mary looked like a doll. She was blonde and had beautiful blue eyes. And then Freddie's doctor, Freddie's HIV doctor, Dr. Moyle, revealed that Freddie was enjoying the gay life when the first reports of the mysterious disease targeting New York gay community, and it began to surface. And let me just make something clear. This is not about when or where AIDS began. I know that it began in Africa with animals, but we're talking about the United States, where it began. It began in New York City. So Paul Gambaccini, Freddie's friend, reported that during the 80s, suddenly word started spreading around that people were dying for some sexually transmitted new disease, and they never named it. People weren't sure what it was at that time. Dr. Moyle reported that the first doctors in the early days didn't know the cause of the illness, and they didn't know how the cause of the illness was transmitted, so they couldn't give advice at that time. And since they didn't have a name, guess what they named the new disease? GRID, stemming from gay-related immune deficiency. So, according to the Center of Disease Control Prevention, CDC, about 90% of new HIV infections result from sexual activity. This is why it is important to know your chances of getting HIV from different activities, from male to male sex. The fact is, HIV is most spread during sex and during male to male sex. Of course, I'm not going to argue that it is also contagious to women, but according to the CDC, the highest risk of contracting AIDS is through male to male sex, then through drugs, and then through women to women. But the main point is that it is decreasing among women, and it is decreasing among drug addicts. But guess what? Among the bisexuals and homosexual, it is highly increasing in these days. According to the CDC Center, it seems like nowadays men have amnesia. They don't really think about that. And so during the 1980s, many gay men contracted the fatal virus without even knowing it existed. They caught the disease when there was no such thing as safe sex, because no one knew that there was such thing as unsafe sex. In the 1980s, Freddie's HIV doctor stated that the first reports of the mysterious incurable disease started to surface among the gay community in New York City. But don't get confused. The first reports of the contagious mysterious disease in the United States were within the male to male sex. So physicians at that time were looking for people predominantly arising from the gay community in the east and west coast of the United States. Paul Gambaccini, Freddie's friends, reported that suddenly words began to spread around that men were dying of some sexually transmitted new disease. And guess what? The physicians were looking for this disease among the gay community. They didn't have a name for said disease because they weren't sure what it was at that time. So that was one of the reasons why they began to look for that disease among the gay community. So around the year 1980, Dr. Moyle, Freddie's HIV doctor, said, in the early days, we didn't know the cause of the illness, and we didn't know the cause and how it was transmitted. So no one knew at that time. But going back to Freddie, on March 1985 in London, Freddie meets Jim Hutton. Freddie's love of his life was Jim Hutton. Freddie's true love 2 months after Live Aid, and then after his birthday party, Freddie went back to England due to health issues. But guess what? Freddie didn't want to tell Jim because, well, I guess he was afraid that Jim was going to leave him. So he didn't tell Jim that he may be HIV positive. So, but guess what? He kept on being friends with Mary, his ex-girlfriend, and now Mary was his personal assistant. But of course, Mary remarried and had children because Freddie chose to explore his gay side, because he was a homosexual. So Mary had been at Freddie's side for 15 years already. And also moving into the mansion, Mary chose a mansion for Freddie, picked a mansion, a beautiful mansion. And Jim Hutton, Freddie's new lover, went also to live in that mansion. And Freddie was living there. And that's when he learned that Rock Hudson, another movie star, one of the first celebrities to die of AIDS. And it was chilling news. It was chilling news and a warning to Freddie that his promiscuous past might catch up with him. So Dr. Moyle, Freddie's HIV doctor, reported that when somebody acquires HIV, they may have short flu-like illness for a few weeks. Then they go through a period where they are often well for a number of years without knowing that something is going on. That might be for a period of 5 years. And subsequently, after the infection, they might get some minor symptoms. And then somewhere around 10 years of the infection, on average, that's when they most get the infection and risk of death. So you see, that is an insidious disease because, people may think, oh, no, I don't have AIDS, when in fact they do. And by the way, they go and test, and they may test negative, but it may take longer, and they will be spreading the disease. So Freddie's personal physician was Dr. Gordon Atkinson, who reported that Freddie began to notice persistent sore throat. First, at Live Aid concert, which was a symptom of the early onset of the AIDS virus. According to his doctor, the first infections are mild, quite treatable. As the patient develops some mild symptoms, such as skin problems, which may be thrush, and then have some first opportunistic infections of cancers that mark out AIDS. In 1986, Freddie's doctor suggested a test for HIV. Dr. Atkinson stated that in 1986, many people avoided taking the HIV test for good reason, because doctors reported that they had a test available for HIV in 1994, but they didn't have treatment available. So guess what? At that time, so many people, gay people, didn't come forth to testing because to some degree it was pointless, given that if you found out that you had something, you couldn't do anything about it. So why test? Many people thought that this HIV wouldn't touch them. You think it's not going to hit us. But the fact is that if you had developed AIDS, you would die. In August 9, 1986, the Magic Tour Climax was performing, and people knew Freddie was ill. But people did not know at that time specifically with what. Freddie felt very ill after the concert. He had not been diagnosed with HIV, and he hadn't said anything. He had been diagnosed, but he didn't tell anybody. And Freddie was in denial. He hoped to get better. And especially because he found the love of his life, he wanted to be with that love. So Freddie reported that he was very happy with a new relationship with Jim. And he said himself that he couldn't have asked for something better, that there was love. It was love. He was in a very happy place with Jim, and life seemed good. Before Freddie and Jim left for Japan, Freddie got tested for AIDS, for HIV, and subsequently Dr. Atkinson revealed that the blood sample conducted at London's renowned Harley Street, Freddie did not have AIDS at that time, but he had the HIV virus that led to the disease. In October 1986, while Freddie is away on a trip, news breaks that he had an HIV test. And just a few days later, Freddie is visited by a lover from New York, John Murphy. And John opens his shirt and shows him this purple blotches. And John and then shows to Freddie that those blotches and revealing the signs of the killer disease and tells him that he's dying. So John relates to Freddie that his current lover James is dying too. You see, now they're all dying of AIDS. It was a race to see who goes first. That's what he said. So John Murphy died of AIDS on November 11th, 1986, and his partner James White a few weeks later. They were the first of Freddie's lovers to die and two of over 16,000 deaths of AIDS to that date in the U.S. Dr. Moyle, Freddie's HIV doctor, reported that the hospital wards in London were full of people, full of men who were sick of AIDS, and many of those individuals were dying. Richard Young, Freddie's friend and photographer, reported that at that time, many of his gay friends had contracted HIV and were dying with AIDS. It was a very, very sad time. In February 1987, London, Freddie hoped for the best and kept his condition a secret. From that point on, and that's when he lived the great pretender's life. The mustache grown in the 1980s that powerfully identified Freddie with an iconic image of gay masculinity. Now, 7 years later, he abandoned that look. Now there were signs of the virus in Freddie's immune system, losing the fight in stage 4 HIV or AIDS. He began to develop that skin problem, Kaposi sarcoma, red-purple spots on the skin caused by a member of the herpes family. It is relatively common infection, but it doesn't manifest in people who have healthy immune systems. It's only when the immune system is down that it takes the opportunity to create these tumors. Once Freddie knew about the news that he had AIDS, he saw a lot of different doctors and spent a lot of money. At that stage, he didn't think he was going to die of it. Finally, Freddie revealed to Jim, Mary, and his family that he had AIDS. He ordered them not to tell a soul. May 1997, in London newspaper, The Sun had led with revelations of two of Freddie's lovers, Tony Baskin and John Murphy, who had died of AIDS. The revelations came from Paul Printer, Freddie's former manager, on May 1987 in Barcelona. So Freddie was losing his fight against AIDS. As the disease progressed, Freddie became more disabled with wasting of his muscles and fat, loss of vision, and brain function. Freddie's doctor reported that they couldn't do a whole range of different, there could be a whole range of deteriorations at the end of AIDS in the patient's life. In November 1991, Freddie was bedbound. Freddie said, you know what, I don't want to take any more medication. He was very weak. He just wanted to be with his loved ones. Finally, Freddie decided to make a statement about his disease. But guess what? Remember Mary, his ex-girlfriend, stayed with him until the end. And Freddie called Mary my faithful. From then on, he just took powerful oral painkillers. And after that, he went quite quickly, according to his doctors. Freddie's doctor stated that as the immune system of an AIDS patient becomes very weak, people get overwhelmed with infections, whether they're viral infections, fungal infections, bacterial infections that causes the death of an individual with AIDS. Freddie died of bronchopneumonia resulting from advanced AIDS, and 3 days later, Freddie was cremated. So the next day, the Daily Mirror made an extraordinary attack on Freddie. And I think it was very cruel because, when a loved one dies, they shouldn't be making these type of reports. And the report stated that it may have been brave for Freddie to announce that he had AIDS the moment it was diagnosed. It wasn't brave to conceal it until his last few hours. There was nothing flamboyant about catching AIDS and probably spreading it to others. Nothing admirable about touring the street seeking rent boys to booger and share drugs with. Mercury clearly had a talent to entertain millions, if not me, but his private life is a revolting tale of depravity, lust, and downright wickedness. The bright side cannot excuse, condone, or explain the dark side, and no one should confuse the two. Mercury died from a disease whose main victims in the Western world are homosexuals. For his kind, AIDS is a form of suicide. His death won't help the fight against AIDS because he gave a glowing glamour to the lifestyle. And I want to clarify something because one may think that in a gay marriage is a monogamous relationship where only two males, have sexual intercourse. The problem with this is that normally, realistically seeing at this, when they meet each other, they're not the first ones that meet each other. Normally, they had previous lovers in order to find the true love. If not one, the other partner. So that is such a risky business because at the end, they may still contract AIDS. And like I said, male to male sex, according to the Centers of Disease Control, are of high risk, the highest risk of all. And again, the other, the drug addicts and other women are the rates are decreasing, but in male to male sex, it is increasing rampantly. So according to the AIDS Institute, male who had sex with other men were the first cases among humans reported to be infected with HIV in the years 1979-1981. The virus has existed in the United States since at least the mid-70s, 1970s, and rare types of pneumonia, cancer, and other illnesses were being reported by doctors in Los Angeles and New York among a number of male patients who had sex with others. Like I said, the first reports of HIV among humans in the United States, and just to clarify, are between men and men. The New York Times newspapers first mentioned the gay-related immune deficiency killer disease in an article published in May 11, 1982. According to the AIDS Institute,